My wife planned my funeral while I was still breathing. She stood in front of our friends, crying into a black handkerchief, and told them I was dying. Then she said her goodbyes. Without me. I didn't hear about it from a doctor. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from my brother, who called me late one night and asked why I hadn't told him I was terminal. That's how this story starts. Not with sickness, not with an accident, but with a funeral invitation that had my name on it and a date circled in red. Let me slow this down, because even now, years later, my chest tightens when I say it out loud. I'm Uncle Mickle. I was 46 years old at the time. I had a full-time job, a bad knee, a wife of 17 years, and exactly zero intentions of dying anytime soon. I wasn't sick. I wasn't hiding a diagnosis. I hadn't even had a cold in months. But according to my wife, I had 6 weeks left to live. The service was already planned. A chapel on the east side of town. Soft hymns. Printed programs. My picture, one she chose carefully, from before my hair went gray, sat at the front beside a closed casket. Closed, because she told everyone I'd wasted away too much at the end. And here's the part that still makes my hand shake. People came. People I worked with. Neighbors I waved to every morning. Even a couple of cousins I hadn't seen since my mother's burial. They hugged my wife. They told her I'd been a good man. They cried for me, while I was at home, alive, rinsing a coffee mug in the sink. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't burst through the door demanding answers. At first, I thought my brother was confused, or cruelly joking, or mixing me up with someone else. I asked him to repeat himself. He did, slower this time. He even forwarded me the message he'd received. A tasteful email. Black border. My name in bold. Celebration of life for Michael Harris. My life. Celebrated. Without my consent. That night, I sat in the dark living room and listened to my wife breathe upstairs. Same rhythm I'd known for nearly 2 decades. In. Out. Calm. Steady. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just buried me in front of half the town. I remember thinking, very clearly, that whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding. You don't accidentally plan a funeral. You don't accidentally tell people your husband is terminally ill. You don't accidentally accept condolences for a man who still takes out the trash and complains about gas prices. Something had already ended. I just didn't know it yet. The day of the funeral came faster than I expected. I didn't shave. I didn't dress up. I put on a clean jacket, the kind you wear when you don't want to be noticed. I drove myself to the chapel and parked 2 streets over. My hands were steady on the wheel, which surprised me. My mind felt strangely quiet, like it does right before a storm breaks. From the back doors, I could hear music. Soft, mournful, familiar hymns my wife used to hum while folding laundry. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air, smelling flowers I hadn't bought, grief I hadn't earned. I didn't know what I was going to do once I stepped inside. I only knew I was done being dead in someone else's story. And just as she reached the part of her speech where she thanked everyone for loving me, I opened the door. Before all of this, before my name showed up on folded programs and strangers cried over coffee for a man who wasn't gone, my life was ordinary. And I don't say that with disappointment. I say it with respect. Ordinary is what you build when you think you're safe. My wife's name was Laura. We met in our late 20s, back when we both still believed effort alone could fix most things. She laughed loud, talked fast, and had this way of leaning into you when she listened, like the rest of the room didn't matter. I fell for that. Hard. We married 3 years later in a small church with mismatched flowers and a borrowed sound system that crackled during our vows. Nothing fancy, just promises said clearly. For a long time, we kept them. We didn't have kids. That was a mutual decision, or at least I thought it was. We talked about it for years, circled it, stepped away from it, came back again. In the end, life filled up anyway. Work, family, bills, the quiet pride of fixing things yourself. Saturday mornings were for grocery runs and bad coffee. Sundays were for yard work and silence. It wasn't exciting, but it was solid. I worked as a regional facilities manager. Nothing glamorous, but dependable. I was the guy people called when things broke. Laura worked part-time at a local nonprofit, mostly admin work, Lots of community events. She knew everyone. Or at least, everyone knew her. She was good at that. Always had been. At home, we moved around each other easily. Same routines, same shortcuts. I always locked the doors. She always double-checked the stove. I made the coffee. She picked the music. These little habits settle in over time, and you stop noticing them. They feel permanent. Like gravity. That's the part that hurts the most now. How sure I was. Looking back, I can see the hairline cracks. But at the time, they didn't register as danger. Just life shifting its weight. Laura started staying later at work. Said they were short-staffed. Fundraisers ran long. Donors liked to talk. I believed her because it made sense, and because I trusted her. She took more phone calls outside. Said the reception was better. She smiled less when she thought I wasn't looking. Not sad exactly. Just elsewhere. Like her mind was always 5 minutes ahead of her body. I asked once if everything was okay. Not accusing. Just checking in. She said she was tired. I nodded. We were all tired. That answer fit neatly into the space I gave it. There were still good moments. We still laughed at dumb shows. Still shared inside jokes no one else would understand. She still kissed my cheek before bed. I still reached for her in the dark. Nothing dramatic disappeared all at once. But something changed in her eyes. It's hard to explain unless you've seen it. That moment when someone starts editing themselves around you. Conversations get shorter. Answers get smoother. Less detail. Like they're careful not to trip over the truth. I noticed it without naming it. Felt it without touching it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake and listen to the house settle. Pipes ticking. Wind against the siding. Laura breathing beside me. And I'd feel this faint unease. Like a question forming without words. Not suspicion. Not fear. Just a quiet sense that I was no longer part of every room she walked into. Maybe you felt something like that too. Not enough to confront. Just enough to notice. The thing is, when you've built a life brick by brick, you don't assume it's about to collapse. You assume it needs maintenance. A conversation. A weekend away. Time. I told myself we were just in a season. That season's pass. So I kept doing what I'd always done. Went to work. Paid bills. Fixed what broke. Trusted my wife. That trust felt like strength back then. I didn't know yet how heavy it would become. The first real crack didn't come with shouting or tears. It came quietly, like most things that matter. It was a Wednesday. Nothing special about it. I got home earlier than usual because a site inspection got canceled. The house was empty, which wasn't unusual anymore. Laura had a board meeting, or a donor dinner, or one of those events that all sounded the same if you didn't ask too many questions. I remember opening the fridge and seeing a casserole dish with a sticky note on it. Eat whenever. Long night. Love you. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt rehearsed, like something written ahead of time, just in case. I ate alone at the counter, standing up, scrolling through my phone. That's when my brother's name popped up. Not a call, just a message. Hey man, random question. Everything okay? I stared at it for a few seconds. My brother isn't the random question type. He's blunt, practical. If he asks something like that, it's usually because someone else said something first. I typed back. Yeah. Why? There was a pause. Long enough to notice. Long enough for that quiet unease to lean forward. Then the phone rang. He didn't waste time. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? I asked, already feeling my stomach tighten. That you're sick. Laura said. He stopped himself. She said it's serious. I sat down. I remember that clearly. The exact moment my legs gave up and I slid onto the stool. I didn't interrupt him. I just let him keep talking, because I needed to hear how far this thing had gone. She called Mom last week, he said. Didn't want to scare anyone, but said it wasn't good. Asked us to respect your privacy. Said you didn't want visitors. I felt cold. Not shocked, cold. Like my body was already trying to protect me from something it didn't fully understand yet. I told him the truth. Plain. Simple. I'm not sick. Silence on the line. The kind that hums. What do you mean? You're not sick, he finally said. I mean, I had a physical 3 months ago. Clean. I go to work every day. I'm fine. Another pause. Then his voice dropped. Mick, she told people you're terminal. That word landed heavy. Terminal. It's not one you miss here. It sticks. We hung up not long after that. He apologized, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. Said he'd forward me what he had. I told him not to say anything else to anyone. Not yet. I needed time. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, trying to line up the facts with the woman I thought I knew. It didn't fit. Not cleanly. Not logically. Laura wasn't cruel. She wasn't reckless. Whatever this was, it had intention behind it. That's what scared me. I didn't confront her when she got home that night. She came in after 10, tired, heels in hand, hair pulled loose. She smiled when she saw me still awake, asked if I'd eaten, kissed my forehead. Her pulse was steady. I could feel it under my lips. I almost asked her right then. Almost said, "Why are you telling people I'm dying?" But something stopped me. Not fear, instinct. The same one that tells you not to spook a wild animal if you want to see where it runs. Instead, I watched. Over the next few days, small things started standing out. A black dress laid out on the bed, dry cleaned and pressed. A hushed phone call she ended when I entered the room. A stack of papers she slid into a drawer too quickly when I walked by. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself there had to be an explanation. But the truth was already pushing through the cracks, and I could feel it under my skin. It's strange, the moment when doubt stops being hypothetical, when it stops being a feeling and starts becoming a shape. You don't know what it is yet, but you know it's there, sitting in the room with you. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling long after Laura fell asleep. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't heartbroken. I was alert, wide awake in a way I hadn't been in years. And somewhere in that dark, a thought settled and that I couldn't shake. If she was willing to tell people I was dying, what else was she willing to do while I wasn't looking? I didn't rush the truth. That might sound strange, considering what I was up against, but rushing felt dangerous. Whatever Laura was doing, she was doing it carefully. I needed to be quieter than that. The first thing I did was check our finances. Not because I suspected money, at least not yet, but because money leaves tracks. Always has. I logged into our joint account one afternoon while she was at work and scrolled back further than I ever had before. There it was. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, then a separate account I didn't recognize, opened 6 months earlier, funded steadily. Nothing flashy. No wild spending. Just preparation. Preparation for what? I printed nothing. Saved nothing. I closed the browser and sat there with my hands folded, like I was waiting for someone to tell me what I already knew. The next step came by accident. Laura left her tablet on the kitchen counter the following morning. She was already out the door, running late, calling back over her shoulder that she loved me. The screen lit up a few seconds later with a notification. A calendar reminder. Service finalized. Confirm head count. My chest tightened. I didn't unlock the device right away. I stood there for a long time, staring at the black screen, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. There's a line you cross when you stop respecting privacy and start protecting yourself. I crossed it that morning. The calendar was full. Meetings, calls, appointments, all labeled vaguely enough that I'd never questioned them before. But now I knew how to read between the lines. One event in particular caught my eye. Chapel walkthrough. I clicked it. Address attached. Date. Time. Notes. Catering confirmed. Flowers ordered. Photos selected. My photo. I don't remember sitting down, but I must have, because the next thing I noticed was the chair under me and the way my hands were shaking. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't exaggeration. This was real, detailed, organized. She hadn't just told people I was dying. She was rehearsing my absence. I kept scrolling. Emails synced to the calendar. Condolences already coming in. People offering to bring food. Asking how she was holding up. Telling her how strong she was. Strong. That word showed up a lot. The lowest moment didn't come from the logistics, though. It came from a message buried deeper in the inbox. One she hadn't archived. One she hadn't hidden well enough. It was from a man named Evan. I didn't know him, but Laura did. The message was short, familiar, intimate in a way that doesn't require many words. Once this is over, we won't have to sneak anymore. I stared at that sentence until it blurred. There it was, the shape of the thing I'd felt but couldn't name. Not just betrayal, replacement. She wasn't just ending a marriage, she was clearing space, making room, and she was doing it by erasing me while I was still alive. I felt stupid then. Not angry. Not yet. Just small. Like I'd been walking through my own life half asleep, trusting the ground beneath my feet, because it always had been there before. I thought about every late night, every excuse I'd accepted, every time I'd chosen calm over curiosity. I thought about how easy it must have been for her once she realized I wouldn't push. That's the part that still hurts if I let it. The realization that love can become camouflage, that your best intentions can make you invisible. I closed the tablet and put it back exactly where I'd found it. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same lines, same man people were already mourning. This is the part where a lot of stories turn explosive, where someone screams or throws something or confronts the liar in a blaze of truth. That didn't happen. What happened instead was quieter. I sat on the edge of the tub and let the weight of it all settle in. Let it hurt. Let it sink. There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't ask for comfort. It just asks to be acknowledged. If you've ever had the ground drop out from under you without warning, you know what I mean. That hollow moment where your body reacts before your thoughts catch up, where you realize something precious has already been lost, and there's no version of the future where you don't carry that scar. By the time Laura came home that night, something in me had gone still. I wasn't broken, but I was done being unaware. Pain does something strange when you sit with it long enough. It stops shouting. It stops demanding. It just waits. That's where I was after the discovery. Not numb. Not calm. Just deliberate. I didn't confront Laura. Not yet. Confrontation would have been about release, and I wasn't ready to give her that. I needed clarity first. Control. I needed to know exactly what she'd done, and how far she planned to take it. So I started preparing. I took a sick day from work and went to a lawyer. Didn't dramatize it. Didn't mention funerals or affairs at first. Just said my wife had been moving money and lying about my health. That was enough to change the man's posture. He listened carefully after that. Turns out, planning someone's funeral while they're alive isn't illegal. But forging a narrative to move assets, that's different. I opened my own account, redirected my paycheck, took copies of everything that mattered, insurance policies, deeds, records. I changed passwords she'd never think to check, the ones tied to old habits, old memories, high school nicknames, the dog we never had. Every step felt like removing a splinter. Painful, yes, but relieving. At night, I lay beside her and stared into the dark, listening to her breathe, wondering how someone could sleep so soundly while writing someone else out of existence. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. What I felt was colder than hate. I felt resolved. There was one moment, though, where my hands almost gave me away. She reached for me in her sleep. Just a reflex. Her fingers curled around my wrist like they had 1,000 times before. For a second, my chest tightened, and I almost forgot everything. Almost remembered the version of us that still felt real. Then I thought about the chapel, the flowers, the speech she was rehearsing about my courage. I gently pulled my hand free. The decision came fully formed a few days later. Not emotional. Clean. I wasn't going to expose her privately. I wasn't going to beg for honesty. I wasn't going to disappear quietly and let her control the story. I was going to attend my own funeral. Not to humiliate her. Not to scream. But to reclaim the truth. There's a difference. I told my brother what I planned. He was quiet for a long time after I finished explaining. Then he said, "That's bold." I told him to come, but not to sit near the front. I wanted him to watch, not intervene. I rehearsed nothing. No speech. No accusations. I trusted the moment to do the talking for me. The night before the service, Laura ironed her dress in the bedroom while I watched TV downstairs. She moved carefully, methodically, like someone preparing for something important. She didn't know I'd already read her words, that I'd already seen how she described my life, my death, my absence. I wondered briefly if I was doing the right thing. Not legally, morally. There are moments in life where there's no clean answer, where silence protects peace, but truth restores balance, where exposing a lie costs everyone something, including you. Maybe you've stood in a place like that, where either choice feels heavy in a different way. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt tired of being erased. The morning of the funeral, I showered slowly, shaved, put on a jacket I hadn't worn in years. Not a suit. I didn't want to look like a ghost. I wanted to look like a man who still belonged to himself. As I drove toward the chapel, I didn't feel nervous. I felt focused, like everything before that moment had been rehearsal for standing up straight when it counted. I parked down the street and walked the rest of the way. I could hear the music before I reached the door. Soft, familiar, a song Laura knew I liked. That irony didn't escape me. I paused outside, hand on the handle, took one breath. Not for courage, for clarity. Then I opened the door and stepped back into my life, right in the middle of my own goodbye. The door creaked louder than I expected. Every head turned. That's the thing people don't tell you about moments like this. There's no dramatic music cue, no slow motion, just a sudden shift of air when reality walks in and refuses to leave. I stood in the back of the chapel, framed by light from the open door. I could smell flowers. Lilies. Too many lilies. My name was printed on the program in the usher's hand. He looked at me like he was seeing something impossible and didn't trust his eyes. Laura was at the podium. Mid-sentence. She was talking about my strength, about how I'd faced the end with dignity. Her voice cracked just enough to sound convincing. She had one hand on the podium, the other clutching a tissue. Black dress. Pearls. The whole picture. Then she saw me. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there. The sound that came out of her wasn't a scream. It was sharper than that. Short. Involuntary. Like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Her knees buckled, and if the man beside her hadn't caught her, she would have hit the floor. People started murmuring. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed, nervous, confused, wrong. A few thought it was a cruel joke. A performance. Denial makes people creative. I walked down the aisle slowly. Not to be dramatic, because I didn't need to rush. Every step felt solid, grounded, like the floor had finally decided to hold me again. Faces blurred past me. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, all wearing the same expression. Confusion tipping into recognition. A man in the front row whispered my name like he was testing it. When I reached the front, I turned, not toward Laura, but toward the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to clear something up." You could hear breathing. That's it. 40 people holding their breath at once. "I'm not terminal," I said. "I'm not sick. And as of this morning, I'm very much alive." Someone dropped a program. It sounded loud as a gunshot. I looked at Laura then. Really looked at her. Her face had drained of color. Eyes wide. Mouth opening and closing like she was searching for words that had abandoned her. "I don't know why you were told otherwise," I continued evenly. "But I didn't plan this service. I didn't approve it, and I didn't know about it until a few days ago." That's when the room shifted, from shock to understanding. You could feel it. People recalculating memories, conversations, condolences they'd offered under false pretenses. I didn't accuse her by name. I didn't have to. Laura tried to speak. No sound came out. She swayed again, and this time she did faint. Clean. Straight down. Someone screamed her name. Someone else rushed forward. Chairs scraped. I stepped back. Not out of spite. Out of space. They helped her to a seat. Someone asked if they should call an ambulance. Someone else asked what was going on. Voices overlapped. Chaos bloomed. I raised my hand. Not high. Just enough. "I'm going to step outside," I said. "You all deserve answers, but they're not mine to give." And with that, I walked out. No dramatic exit. No final line. Just the sound of the door closing behind me and the sudden quiet of fresh air. I stood on the steps and breathed. Deep. Full. Like a man who'd just been returned to himself. A few people followed me out. My brother. A co-worker. A woman I barely knew who had tears in her eyes and kept apologizing like she'd done something wrong. I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. Inside, the service unraveled. I didn't go back in. If you're wondering whether that moment felt good, whether it felt like justice, I'll be honest. It felt necessary. There's a difference. Some truths don't arrive gently. They arrive because you finally stop making room for the lie. The days after the funeral were quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not peaceful at first, just empty. Like a room after everyone's left and the chairs are still out of place. Laura didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. I packed a small bag for myself anyway, just in case, but I never needed it. By the next afternoon, her sister came by to collect some clothes. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Said Laura was resting. I didn't ask where. We didn't speak directly for weeks. Lawyers did most of the talking after that. Efficient. Emotionless. Paperwork replacing conversation. The affair came out quickly once the story cracked open. Evan wasn't brave without secrecy. He disappeared as soon as things got complicated. Funny how that works. The community reacted in waves. First confusion, then embarrassment, then anger, not at me, but at the situation. People didn't know where to place their sympathy. Some avoided me. Others hugged me too tightly. A few tried to joke, like humor could smooth over the discomfort of having mourned a living man. I let them. I didn't feel like managing anyone else's feelings. I had enough of my own to sort through. The house felt different without Laura. Not haunted, just rearranged. Quieter. I moved things slowly. A mug here. A chair there. I didn't erase her all at once. I didn't need to. Her absence was already loud enough. What surprised me most was the grief. Not for her exactly. For the version of my life I'd believed in. For the future I'd assumed was waiting. You can lose something that was never real and still mourn it deeply. There were nights I sat on the couch and stared at nothing, replaying conversations, searching for the exact moment things had turned. I never found it. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe endings are just 1,000 small choices, finally agreeing with each other. Work became a refuge. Familiar problems. Clear outcomes. I threw myself into it without burning out. There's a difference between distraction and rebuilding. This felt like the latter. I started walking in the mornings. Nothing intense. Just enough to feel my body moving forward again. I cooked more. Slept better. The quiet stopped feeling empty and started feeling earned. Laura and I finalized the divorce 6 months later. No dramatic courtroom moment. No last words. Just signatures and a shared understanding that whatever we'd been to each other was over. I saw her once after that. At a grocery store, of all places. We passed each other in the aisle. She looked thinner. Tired. She opened her mouth, like she wanted to say something. I nodded. That was all. There was nothing left to explain. If you're expecting me to say I forgave her, I won't. Not because I'm bitter, but because forgiveness isn't always the point. Sometimes the point is release. And I'd already let go. What stayed with me, oddly enough, was the kindness of strangers. The woman from the funeral, who wrote me a note, saying she was glad I was alive. The co-worker who brought me lunch without asking questions. My brother, who checked in every Sunday like clockwork. Those things mattered. If you've ever had your life split cleanly down the middle, before and after, you know how disorienting it can be. How long it takes for the after to feel like something you can stand on. I won't pretend it was easy, but it was honest. And honest, it turns out, is a solid place to build from. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes after everything collapses. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. Just a steady knowing that settles in once the dust finally stops moving. For a long time, I thought survival meant enduring, holding on, keeping things together no matter the cost. That's what I'd been doing in my marriage, mistaking silence for strength, routine for security. What that experience taught me is simpler and harder. You don't owe your life to someone who's already decided to live without you. Being declared gone while you're still breathing does something to a man. It forces you to ask questions you can't dodge anymore. Who knows the real you? Who benefits from your absence? And maybe the hardest one, how long have you been shrinking to keep the peace? I asked myself those questions slowly, without judgment, without rushing toward neat answers. Some of them are still with me, and that's okay. Not every lesson needs to be resolved to be valuable. If there's one thing I carry forward, it's this. Truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs space. Once you stop making room for the lie, the truth has a way of standing up on its own. Maybe you're listening to this while driving. Maybe late at night when the house is quiet. Maybe you're in the middle of something that doesn't feel right, but you haven't found the words for it yet. If so, know this. You're allowed to question the story you've been handed, even if it's one you helped write. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. And the moral, earned the hard way. A life reclaimed is worth more than a lie politely endured.